Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our first ever virtual UNCA Q&A. Today, we're going to be talking about financial aid options at UNC Asheville. With me today, I have Cody Woods and Jennifer Taylor, both from our financial aid department. Oh, there they are. Look at that bulldog blue. I love it. Oh, yes. This is our lovely shade of blue that we hope to see you in this fall. So the format of today's webinar, Cody and Jennifer are going to get started with a brief presentation about some financial aid options, and then we're going to open the floor up for some questions. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Grayson Randall. I'm an admission counselor at UNC Asheville, so I think I'll be able to answer some admission-related questions towards the end if you have any on your mind. So like I mentioned earlier, if you didn't catch it, please feel free to write any questions you may have in that Q&A box. And we do want to let you know that if you have personal questions related to your financial aid package, please feel free to put your name and email address in that Q&A box, and we will reach out to you personally tomorrow. And please note, only the panelists can see this. So it's of course confidential. And of course, you're welcome to share where you're from and your name in our chat box. So let's get started with Cody and Jennifer.
All right. Hello, everybody. How are you today? I hope you're well. I have a presentation I have put together. You'll probably hear from me more than you'll hear from Jen. She's my moral support in most things that I do. I am trying to share my screen and it's telling me I cannot. Let's see. Well, in the meantime, while we get that part figured out, I will let you know that you can see my couch behind me. I'm on the floor in my living room as Jen is at home as well. So we've all been affected by COVID-19. So we want to make sure that you understand that we also feel that on a personal level. So we realize that there have been some changes that have been made in a lot of our lives as far as this goes. And we have some thoughts and some processes in place that we will be able to try and help answer some of those questions as far as it pertains to your financial aid. So give me just a second. All right. Grayson, is that good?
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure. So we're going to start off with some Q&A time with financial aid at UNC Asheville. And so we're going to assume that you've done your FAFSA. And so what are the next steps? So we're going to cover a couple different things here. At the very end, there's going to be a timeline to kind of give you some dates and some information. That way you kind of know what's next and what to expect in kind of a timely manner. So we're going to cover how do you view your financial aid package, your financial aid emails, what those are and why we communicate with you. Verification, some of you may have been selected for that and some of you may have not, but we're going to cover it in the event that you ever are in the future. And then the differences between financial aid and then student accounts, because those are two offices that we do kind of work hand in hand, but we handle completely different things. So how do you view your financial aid? One part is the student account that you're actually going to go through. I have not personally seen the student side of OnePort, so to try and navigate you through it on my end would be a little technically hard. So what we have here is a screenshot of the financial aid website. I've highlighted in two different places, you'll notice, accept your award financial aid, or your financial aid award, I'm sorry. And then another spot, you can click on both of those and it has a lovely website that will list on there for you the different steps that you'll click on how to access that. There's also a nice little PDF of some screenshots at the very bottom and a link that you can access that will guide you through in a step-by-step screenshot on how to access that information as well. Some types of aid that you'll notice when you go in and you're starting to review your financial aid package that I just wanted to go through. So you have some need-based aid. Your FAFSA is required in order to access those forms of aid. They often include your grants, which are your Pell Grants that come from the federal government. The long one, the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant that we just shorthanded FSEOG for the sake of time, also comes from the government as well. Federal WorkStudy, I will cover that because I know that there's some questions about that a little bit later, but that is another form of need-based aid that requires the FAFSA on file. If you are state residents of North Carolina, that opens access to your UNC need-based grant and the lottery scholarship as well from the state. And then any university grants that we have as well. We require the FAFSA to be on file for that. But then you have different forms of merit aid, which are your scholarships, university scholarships that we don't, and outside sources that you may have from employers that you may have had in the past, or some kind of civic organizations in your community. Self-help aid, which is any kind of aid that you contribute towards your own payments. So that is money that you come out of pocket, a savings plan. If your grandma's put $1 every day of your life in a piggy bank and you bust it open to pay for college, those kinds of things come from that. Then we have the dreaded word, direct loans. Direct loans, the FAFSA is required for those, and we will talk about, as you can see here, the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized loans when those are offered. Subsidized is a need-based loan. There's no interest accruing while you're in school, as the government is paying the interest payment while you're in school. As long as you are in at least 6 credit hours and you are enrolled and have not graduated, they will continue to pay that interest on there. Unsubsidized is kind of the opposite. It will accrue interest while you're in school, but you still have to be in at least 6 credit hours to get those, so just keep that in mind. Your Parent Plus loan is similar to a direct loan, but that is a loan that your parents would actually apply for and take out in their name in order to help subsidize the remaining cost of your attendance. Alternative educational loans, FAFSA is not required. Those are loans that you actually seek out on your own, and you would do the legwork on applying for those at different institutions that have educational loans. And then outside scholarships, notify the financial aid office. We'll talk about that, why, in just a moment. So emails from financial aid. I didn't want to put a whole lot of text here, just the 3 most important words that I could think of. Please read them. And I say this only because I was a student, last year myself. I understand that emails can sometimes be overwhelming, and you got other things that you want to do, but I promise as much as we email, there's a point and purpose behind them, that we're typically asking for information to make sure that this process is easier on you and runs smoother, because it's typically things that we need or we want to notify you about. If you have questions about them, please let us know. We will be happy to help. We typically have a less than 1 day turnaround time on email, so there's something impressive from our office. Verification. So what does it mean? Why me? What is needed? We're going to go through all these questions. Verification is a fancy word for kind of just a mini audit that the government has us do on the information that you put on your FAFSA. So when you do your FAFSA, you're putting your wages and all kinds of other information that comes from your tax returns on there. So sometimes you get selected. There's a 1/3 chance, a 33% chance, 1/3 of all the FAFSAs that are completed every year get selected for verification. But sometimes there's something on there that just made it not go through smoothly. And so that just means that it gets flagged, and we just have to figure out what that was, make sure that everything looks good, and then we take care of it from there. So that kind of covers the what does it mean and why you. What is needed, that will be dependent on a case-by-case scenario. Most of the time, and Jen can feel free to tag in if I'm wrong, most of the time we will always ask you for either a dependent or independent verification worksheet. That is typically the required document that will always be there, that has to be done for each one. After that, it's kind of dependent on the situation. If you have questions about yours in particular, please feel free to email us at finaid@unca.edu, or give us a call, and we'll do our best to help walk you through it as soon as we can. So why do we need them? Again, it's just to verify that all the information that's reported on your FAFSA is correct, so that way when it gets to the Department of Education, we have everything kind of in line to say, here's what they presented, here's how we know it's right, we're good, keep moving forward. How do you get these items to us? There are several different ways. We have a fax machine that you can fax them to. You can mail them to us through the mail. Most of the time we tell you not to email things, in particular like your tax returns, just for security purposes. We want to make sure that your information is secure, and they do tend to have things like your social security number and all that information on there. Sometimes that's the only means that a family has to get that information to us, and that's completely acceptable if that's your means. We do have our dependent verification worksheet. It's actually done through a portal where you can attach those items to it, and it's done through a secure portal that way. So there are a couple different options. If you have questions, please let us know. This is a fun one on why do you have to include your parents? And this goes for FAFSA, this goes into a lot of your verification documents and all these other fun things when you're trying to think about why does it say I'm dependent on my parents? The questions on the FAFSA you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. Are you 24? Are you married? Are you veteran? Are you a ward of the court, legal guardianship, foster care, or do you have a child that receives more than 50% of its care from you? So that's expenses and whatnot. If the answer is no, you're considered dependent for financial aid based on the federal government's definition of that term on your parents. If you answered yes, then you would be considered, or you could be considered independent for financial aid, but you will have to provide proof before you receive that aid. We just have to verify that if one of those is met, we have to verify how it's met, and then we move forward from there. And speaking of your parents, there's a lovely thing called FERPA. It's the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. The federal government basically has a rule in place that protects you and your educational experience as a person. If you've ever been to the hospital, you may have heard the term HIPAA thrown around. This is the same kind of thing, but more of an educational aspect. So you would give us the permission to speak to your parents or not on your financial situation. For information on UNC Asheville's, well, we call it a proxy form here, but it's the FERPA guidelines. You can visit the registrar's website and look under forms of records, or if you're like me and you just really love to Google things because you don't know how to navigate other people's websites sometimes, just Google UNCA proxy access, and that's the first link that typically pops up. It'll take you right there. So financial aid and student accounts. This is the fun part where I get to say this about my job. Financial aid, we're the good guys. We like to give you the money and find it and help you do all this stuff. And then student accounts, they're the bad guys. Don't tell them I said that, but I got to say it. They're the ones that give you the bill. They're the ones that you make the payments to, and they handle your refund. So that can make them the good guy too on certain days. And there's some contact information if you are wanting to get any of that written down or how that works for you. I know there were some questions about college costs, so I'll break this down for you a little bit. Your cost of attendance is made up of several different factors. You'll see them on your left: your tuition and fees, your room and board, textbook supplies, personal expenses, travel costs, and miscellaneous. That is typically always going to be higher than you will actually pay to attend the school or the university. This cost of attendance is also the maximum amount of financial aid that you can receive. I like to think of it as a ceiling. You can have up to this amount of financial aid, which is that cost of attendance, not a penny beyond that because we have to stay in regulation, but you can have anywhere in between there, and that will be kind of where your financial aid falls. The difference between the two things here, the direct billed cost and the indirect cost not billed, your bill and what you pay to the student accounts, because they're the ones that are taking your money, remember that, are the direct billed costs. So those are your tuition, your fees, your room, and your board. Those are the items that we can charge you for as far as the university goes. The indirect costs are things that we've built into that cost of attendance, understanding that you're going to want to buy your textbooks and supplies, that you will have personal expenses. We were all pretty much in college at one point. We realized that pizza on a Friday night might be something you want to do, Saturday, a movie kind of deal. Like those are things that we anticipate that you'll spend money on, and they're kind of built in there. Traveling home for any of the holidays. Those are all built into that cost of attendance to try and make room for that in your budget. So here we are at one of the last slides before we open a lot of things up for questions. I just wanted to give you kind of a timeline. FAFSA, it opens every year in October for the following fall. So for this fall, coming up in August, it actually opened up this past October. The same will be true this October to open up for next August. They do use 2 years ago taxes, so keep that in mind. This year you went off of 2018's taxes. Next year you'll go off of 2019's taxes. So just bear that in mind. Verification, we will notify you once we have your FAFSA and we see that it's been selected for verification. There's not a hard deadline on verification. That's why it's always hard to kind of talk about these things. You could complete it prior to your bill being due. You could complete it in the middle of the semester. That's kind of on you and your timeline. We highly prefer that you complete that prior to your bill being due because we think, one, we want to get that done and out the way for you. And two, you don't want to be stressed with the bill hanging over your head for half the semester before those kinds of things get done. Some notes under there, part of that that's not necessarily verification, but things that you want to get done so that way your money pays out. A master promissory note and an entrance loan counseling. Those are tied in directly to the student loans that are offered to you from your FAFSA that you will see on your account. Those are 2 federal regulations that are required to be done before those loans, if you accept them, will be dispersed to help pay your bill. The master promissory note is a note literally that you're promising that you're going to pay the money back when all that's said and done. And entrance loan counseling is an educational module that the federal government's put together in order to help teach you what a loan is, how interest rates compound, and what that would look like post your educational experience and in the payback process. So those are 2 for the loans. Your terms and conditions, that is something you will get emailed about until those get accepted. Those need to be accepted before any money will pay to your account, whether those are scholarships, your Pell Grant, your student loans, any of that. They do talk about your loans in terms and conditions, but I want to specify here, accepting terms and conditions does not mean that you accepted those loans. It just means that you've read and understood the terms and conditions of all the financial aid that you've been offered. So please make sure you read them, accept them. Otherwise, if you don't, then whatever money you've been offered, it could be, $20,000 in scholarships, but if you didn't hit that one accept button and the bill's due that day, it's not going to pay. So we want to make sure that you don't have that stress going on. So after you do that, you'll accept your award. Once you've deposited, you're coming, you're all going to be wearing Bulldog blue come around August. We're all anticipating it and super excited about it. Then you can accept your award. Once verification's been done and that's been offered out there, you can accept anything that's on there that you want to accept, decline your loans if you wish to, accept them if you need them, and move forward. You're going to register for classes. I had to get some clarification because I've not been on that side of things for a little bit. You will work with your academic advisor and then again at orientation to get in registered for your classes. Once that is said and done, it will generate your bill, which you'll see on the next line will come out according to Student Account's website on July 10th this year. Your bill due date is August 1st. Keep in mind, though, that financial aid will pay to your bill 10 days before classes begin. That's just the way of making sure that you are still, if you enrolled for 12 hours but then changed your mind that you wanted 8, financial aid will adjust based on that number. So it kind of gives you time before they send money and then it has to get sent back. So financial aid will pay. It's just 10 days before classes begin. And then finally, you're here and classes start and it's the first day and you're wondering, where do you want, or where's your money that was left over if you have a refund coming back to you? I want to help you, but I don't control the refunds. Those come from student accounts, if you'll remember. That's the one good thing that they will help you with. They typically issue those immediately on the first day of class if verification's been done and everything is taken care of and that refund is ready for you if you have one. They issue them on the first day of classes. After that, they do it on a weekly basis, I think once or twice a week. You can see those refunds issued to you. Make sure that you sign up for the e-refund if you can. That way it just is directly deposited into your bank account and you don't have to physically pick up a check. It saves time and you get your money faster. That way you can buy the books and supplies that you need. And I think that's it for now. I think we'll open it up for Grayson to do some talking because you've heard me for a while, and then I'll answer some questions.
All right, so I'm going to consult our Q&A box, and thank you so much, folks who have submitted their questions in that Q&A box. Things just get lost in the chat, so it's easier just to have them all in one place. So we'll get started with a question about scholarships, and I think I'll go ahead and answer this question myself. So we had a student ask about the best place to look for scholarships. So as an admission counselor, of course, we have departmental scholarships that you will apply for once you are in your particular major at UNC Asheville. And also, I want to let you know about some good websites, and these are also going to be on our financial aid website, so you don't feel like you have to go find a piece of paper and a pencil and write it down. The first one is fastweb.com. The second one is capex.com. I also want to let you know about the College Foundation of North Carolina. There's a huge scholarship resource guide there as well. Also, email your UNC Asheville admission counselor. You can find who your counselor is based on where you live on our website. Send us an email. We're happy to chat with you about some scholarship options, how to connect you to those. It's what we do. It's what we're here for. So second question, do we need our parents' 2018 or 2019 tax transcript? I'm assuming this is for the FAFSA information or for verification purposes.
Yeah, so there's a couple different scenarios here, and it's going to be dependent on that. Typically, just for verification purposes, right now we are asking for 2018's tax return transcripts. There are other instances, if you are considering a special or a change in circumstance form, that I may be asking for a 2019 tax return transcript, just because I want to see what the income is for this past fiscal year, to see if that makes a difference in awards that we may be giving out.
Excellent. Seems like there's a bit of confusion about the verification process.
Okay.
If you mind breaking that down a bit further and maybe explaining the difference between residency certification and verification, please?
Sure. So residency, just to kind of get that off of there, is done through the RDS system, which is the Residency Determination System of North Carolina. They are the entity in the state of North Carolina that lets us know whether or not you are classified as an in-state resident. And so they handle that portion. When you're applying or when you go through that process, they give you a certain number that you then use on your applications, would let us know that you're in-state. If you haven't done that and you have that number, it's a good idea to contact the admissions office then to get that number in, to make sure that we have you classified as an in-state resident if you truly are, because then that impacts what financial aid you can receive based off of that. For verification purposes, if there is, okay, so for verification, if there's a thing for, I don't think we typically ask for residency stuff in verification. If there's anything, it's more of a citizenship. And that's mostly just asking for any kind of documents that may be needed just to kind of bypass that portion of it. If you have those questions or if that is on there, please let us know. I understand that part can be confusing and it's kind of hard to answer that in a general format. So just call us and we'll talk about it. For verification in and of itself though, when you submit your FAFSA, like I said, there is a 1 out of 3 chance that you're going to get selected for verification. And that's just to verify that the numbers that you put here on FAFSA are the same as what's here on your tax return transcript. Is typically what we're doing. The easiest way to avoid a lot of those extra documents that we're going to ask for is to try and use that data retrieval tool when you're doing your FAFSA, because that links directly from the IRS, which eliminates us having to ask for tax returns and whatnot. It's a good way to kind of shorten that step if you can. Sometimes you don't qualify to use the data retrieval tool. So let's say if you are the student and you attempted to use it, but you didn't work in 2018 and you didn't have any income, you may not have anything on file with the IRS. So they're going to say, hey, you know, Cody, you attempted to do this, but you don't have anything on file for us, so we can't let you do that. And that's okay. It'll just move forward from there and we can help bypass that problem if it comes up for you. Sometimes if things happen, like if I was married in 2018 and then I got divorced, and so I put on FAFSA that I'm divorced now, but I was married and filed a joint tax return in 2018, if that makes sense for some of you. When you have that, it shows as a red flag that your marital status has changed. And so we would then ask for those kinds of documents to help clarify that. So if you're kind of catching the trend here, we're mostly asking for things to clarify and just prove that everything that you put on your FAFSA is correct, just because we want to make sure that it's pristine when it gets to the Department of Ed and they say, hey, this looks good. Continue with awarding them their financial aid and we can move forward from there.
Wonderful, thank you. Definitely helps kind of break down that process, make it a little less intimidating.
Yeah.
I've heard from a couple of participants, a lot of folks are interested in hearing more about the North Carolina fixed tuition. You could speak about that for a moment.
So if you are a North Carolina resident, you get this fun thing for the fixed tuition where your tuition is set for the time that you are attending at UNC Asheville at whatever the tuition cost is for the year that you entered. So if you enter this year, which we know you are, and you're here and you're going to be in Bulldog Blue in August, your tuition will be set for the price that it is set at this current year. So if we increase tuition the following year, you are locked in at the number that it is for this academic year coming up.
Perfect. Another question for you, Cody.
Yeah.
We have several folks who are interested in learning more about work study options on campus, and y'all are in for a treat because Cody himself works with WorkStudy. So Cody, can you just describe how that works, what some of the options might look like for students?
Sure. So I actually manage the work study position, or the work study program. I don't manage the work study positions on campus, but what that entails is it's a form of what we call self-help aid. You are employed through a typically campus partner or office on campus, and you work for up to 10 hours a week, and you can earn funds that then pay kind of a biweekly paycheck. So it's just basically getting a part-time job on campus, which is pretty cool in and of itself. I know that we have a federal work study student that works in financial aid. Most of the time she helps us with filing and helping stuff envelopes and just little cool things every once in a while, I guess. But sometimes we run out of a little bit of things to do, and she gets to kind of hang out and do some homework and get paid for it. I mean, that's a pretty awesome job, I think, sometimes. But what it is you will see it on your financial aid package as a resource. So when you go log in, if you have federal work study offered to you, it'll be offered at $2,700 typically right now at this point for the upcoming academic year as a form of financial aid. It does not go to pay your bill. I just want to emphasize that you will see it on there. That is not something that you will anticipate to go and pay your bill. You can take those paychecks as you've earned them and send them over to student accounts if you want to be on some kind of payment plan, which we can talk about in a minute, to start making those payments towards that bill, but it as a resource will not pay. What it is and the difference between just getting a part-time job on campus versus the federal work study is sometimes there are offices on campus that can't budget. They don't have room in their budget to afford to hire a student to help work for them. And so this helps relieve that pressure on them because it comes from the federal government and from the budget that I manage to offer them money to pay your salary or your salary for working for them and the time that you do. So it's pretty cool. I would highly suggest it's something that you should check out because you can do a couple different, like if you keep a job in one department for a year, you can work in another department the next year, helping build those resumes and looking like you've done a lot of work in a lot of different offices and build different key tasks that you may have there.
Great, thank you. So you set me up for the perfect segue.
I know.
Students go to pay their bills, and what type of payment plans are available?
So it's a good question. One that I am not highly versed in, so I will go ahead and clarify that right up. But I know that there are some options through student accounts. They use a company, I believe it's NailNet, to kind of help manage that system. Traditionally, your face value payment plan is that they have a 4-month payment plan that you pay 25% of whatever you owe per month for over 4 months to just get that bill paid for. So you do have that option that you can pursue with them. It is highly, it's highly used. It's something that a lot of people have had to use. I used it myself when I was in college just to kind of help tie up some ends. And if you know that you've got money that's coming in, maybe like an outside scholarship or your parents have applied for a loan and you just kind of need that time, sometimes it's good to just buy that time, literally. You get in the payment plan to allow that money time to arrive to the school and then make those payments for you. So there are a couple different options I would suggest talking to them about to get accurate information. But yes.
Something I really love about working at UNC Asheville and the community is how the cashier's office really wants to be as helpful as possible. I mean, it's certainly the benefit of attending a small university that's very community minded. We want to work with you. We want to make it as feasible as possible for you to attend UNC Asheville. So they want to work with you. Please don't hesitate to shoot them an email to talk about some payment options. They're pretty flexible when it comes to that.
And their email's very easy. studentaccounts@unca.edu.
Perfect. Another question I've been seeing a couple times, are there financial aid options for studying abroad and or summer courses?
So one of the favorite phrases that we have that gets used quite often in our office is, it depends. And it depends on a couple different things here, where it depends on what kind of financial aid that you have available to you, when the study abroad trip is, for just study abroad in and of itself. If it is during a normal fall or spring semester, yes, your financial aid can help you with your study abroad trip depending on the amount of hours that you're enrolled in. The base rule of thumb for taking classes during summer or for taking a study abroad trip as far as financial aid goes, you want to make sure you're in at least 6 credit hours, because that is the bottom line. Like, federal financial aid will not typically pay for most things under 6 credit hours. Just keep that in mind. So yes, it can pay for your study abroad trip depending on how many hours you're in, and a couple different things for that. Summer classes, summer is an interesting semester in and of itself. Yes, your financial aid can pay. Again, it's that 6 hours kind of thing that we're going with here. If you have Pell Grant eligibility and you're taking 6 credit hours, typically, unless we ever hear from the government, and I don't think we have since either one of us have been working in financial aid, that they don't have Pell Grant money for summer, your Pell Grant can pay. It just depends on, again, those hours and what your EFC is, which is that expected family contribution you get from your FAFSA. Your student loans that are offered to you, if you used 100% of what was offered between fall and spring, unless you changed classes, and we can talk about that on an individual basis, meaning that you went from freshman to sophomore status, you've utilized 100% of what was offered in that year. And so there wouldn't be any loan eligibility left for summer. Scholarships that you get from the university, they pay out for fall and spring typically, and there's not any room for them in summer. So summer is an interesting time in and of itself, just to try and make sure that, one, it works for you, but two, financial aid options are typically limited for summer, but we can work it out on a one-on-one basis to make sure that this is what you have and this is what could go and what can be eligible to help you out in these different scenarios. I'd be happy to work with y'all.
I'm going to kind of craft 2 questions together into one. So what would happen if a student's scholarship exceeds the cost of attendance, and can scholarships be applied to more than just the cost of attendance, for example, transportation or laptops or textbooks?
Okay, so I just want to clarify a couple different things. So for cost of attendance, that's that astronomical number that you'll see sometimes. So if you're an in-state student, it is currently, this year was $20,050, somewhere around there, Jen. I'm waiting. Yeah, okay. There was a tidbit of a head nod. And so what that is that $20,000 is for the whole academic year between fall and spring. If you have a $20,000 scholarship, amazing. That's really that's really great for you. Most of the time you don't see things go above that number. If you do, we take a couple different things into account. If you have accepted your student loans and you got an extra scholarship in that went above that $20,000, we then start taking away some of the money that you would owe back. So your loans and whatnot that you'd have to make payments on later, we start reducing those to replace it with your scholarship. So you don't ever really see the refund come back from that, I guess. But what you see in the interim is that you don't owe as much loan money, because we're kind of replacing some funds. That way it's better for you in the end. But if I'm understanding what I think was meant, is that if your bill for the semester is $5,000 and you have a scholarship that was like $6,000, what happens is $5,000 of those dollars then goes to pay your bill. So your bill's paid off. Well, you have a refund now of $1,000. Student accounts would issue that refund once they're able to, and then you can take that money and yes, you can utilize that for any educational expenses you may have, including purchasing a laptop, your school supplies, books. If you decide your second year on campus that you don't want to live on campus anymore, you have, your best friend and now you want to live in an apartment off campus together. If you get a refund check, you can utilize that for your cost of living. So you need to pay your rent or your electricity bill. Those are things that those refunds can be used for, because they are supplementing your living expenses in order for you to actually come to school and get your education.
Perfect. So first, some unsolicited life advice. Don't live with your best friend. And another question, I think it's a very topical question. What if my parents lost their job due to the COVID-19 pandemic? How can I change the information on my FAFSA and possibly receive more financial aid?
So COVID has affected many people across the board. We have to go by, and what we are governed by is what we call in our office the guidance. The guidance is just a fancy thing of the guidance that the Department of Ed has put in place for us to follow as far as awarding any kind of federal money. Part of that process is a change in circumstance or a professional judgment or whatever special circumstances that people call them at different universities. Here it's a change in circumstance. I actually work through those as well, so you get some good advice from the person that runs it. At the moment, that the guidance is that we are to treat job loss of any kind, whether your parents lost their job prior to COVID or currently during COVID, that we have to follow the policies that have been set in place already. And our current policy has been that job loss or any big change like that, as far as losing a job goes, has to have been in place for 6 months before we can take that into account. So right now, it doesn't sound like it's promising or good news to you at this very moment because the change is actually happening and this is a real thing that's going on currently. But what that does is it allows for any change in the household currently, that if you have any kind of change that happens now and then you get a job later, it kind of helps give that time for any kind of change that happens to be balanced out. We can take it into account, and by all means, if you have something going on in your life that has affected it in that way, please reach out to me. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. Just for guidance purposes right now, it has to be in place for 6 months before we take it into account. So your financial aid package as it is will not look like it's taken it into account because we can at this moment. But we would be more than happy to, once that 6 month mark is hit, if something has happened and has changed that income in your household, by all means, please send it to us because yes, we can review it if that change has still happened in your life, and it could potentially increase your chances for any other need-based aid that may be out there.
Thank you, Cody.
You're welcome.
Here is a question about entrance counseling. So this particular student completed entrance counseling already, but did it a little while ago. Is there kind of a lag with when that is completed to when it is shown as completed on their one port?
Yes, I had it on my notes to mention it and I flew through the slide and didn't do it. So thank you for bringing that question up. Entrance counseling, as far as I know, is the only requirement that we have out there that is lagged, that does not get updated at this point in time. Most of the time, I think our system updates in like a big batch, but that doesn't happen until a little bit later in the process. So right now, entrance counseling, you have done it, you know you've done it. You may have done it 2 or 3 times in some instances. If you're like me and you're like, I got this email again, I just need to make sure I did it and did it again. We understand that, and we know that the system will email you because it still says that it's not been updated yet, but it will update at some point in the future. Just have patience with us while that kind of gets worked on. But if you know you did it and you got that email confirming that you did it when you're completed, you're set and solid.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a couple students reach out about receiving their correct North Carolina residency, but right before the semester starts. I know this is something we see pretty frequently, so do you mind talking about when in-state tuition or in-state residency, would kick in and how that affects the billing cycle for students?
So it's interesting because we are one university and all the offices work really well together here. The system, and when I say that, I mean the computer systems that are in place. When you call in and you give that number to admissions, they update your account showing that you are now an in-state student according to that residency determination system number, which then goes from them to my very nice friend down here in the other corner from me. She gets updated from that system and then updates our system that you're an in-state student. which would then, yes, potentially affect your financial aid award package. So that can make some changes as far as that goes. And then the billing cycle then updates. So you're here through the admissions. We awarded you as an out-of-state student and you have an out-of-state student bill. Admissions would be the first ones that would get updated. Once that system is updated, your financial aid would then reflect that you're an in-state student, and then your bill would change. If my understanding is correct on how all those systems kind of function and tier and work together, that's how it updates. If you know that it's the day before the bill is due and you just got that number into admissions, that's great. Financial aid, we will automatically catch up the minute that we are notified through the system from admissions. Who you would probably want to talk to then is going to be student accounts. They, like Grayson said, they're really nice people that are very understanding and highly accommodating over there. If you talk to them and let them know that you just had that change in your residency kind of determined and the system is updating itself, they'll understand that and they'll know with it. They'll know how to work with it. Just keeping that line of communication open with them is going to really open the door for you to make sure that that process for you is going to be seamless and less stressful.
All right, so I wanted to take a moment to touch on some residency-based questions that I'm seeing in the Q&A box. And thank y'all so much for all of your great questions. I think it's, given us some thoughtful discussion. So first of all, non-North Carolina residents are not eligible for the fixed tuition program. This is a statewide mandate, and as part of the UNC system, UNC Asheville is not able to offer reciprocal in-state tuition to students who may live in bordering states or bordering counties. And that is a statewide policy. We can't really be too flexible with that, unfortunately, but please get in touch with your admission counselor to talk about additional aid options and scholarships. So Cody, if you wanted to take a moment to talk about kind of the one port side of things, how to go in and accept or deny your loans, and how to grant parents access to your financial aid information.
I will do my best. I've not, like I said, I've not been on that side of one port myself, but the understanding is that when you are in one port and you click on your financial aid piece, there are a couple different options that would then pop up. It's very similar to a system that I used at my previous institution. There should be 8 boxes that pop up when you click on financial aid, and they kind of give a short description under each one what you can find in that area. The biggest ones I think that I've ever seen when I was a student and then that I've ever had to direct students to are going to either be under the eligibility tab or your award tab. And that makes sense. Your eligibility is kind of where we're going to tell you this is what we need from you in order to be eligible for your financial aid. And your award tab is where your award is. So those are the two that you will traditionally use. When you go in the award tab, you're going to select award for aid year. That for you coming up is going to be the 2020-2021 year. It's so hard to say sometimes. Too many 20s going on. So when you get into the 2020-2021 year, that screen will load, and I'm having to close my eyes because I'm trying to visualize it. There are 5 tabs up top that should pop up there. The 5th one, if you've not accepted terms and conditions, the 5th one will be blanked out. That is your accept your award offer screen. So that one you can't do until we do the terms and conditions that we talked about. But the first one is typically an award overview, so you can just take a look at it and kind of see what's there. And then the 4th one, again, is terms and conditions. And the 5th one is where you accept or decline your student loans typically. I know that's a very short and brief rundown. The PDF that's on our website probably gives a little bit more information than I can until I can figure out how to get in on the student side of it to kind of figure it out and play with it a little on my own. But I would start there. Giving parental access to your financial aid, there are some concerns there. With that, you can grant proxy access to your parents. And what that does is it allows them to go on and they can see your bill and make payments towards your bill on that portion for student accounts. Proxy access, if you allow them, they can call into financial aid and we can talk to them about what you've been offered, what things are missing for verification, different aspects of financial aid in and of itself. accessing and being able to see your financial aid package, from my understanding, is something that you only as a student should and can do, unless you're sharing your login credentials with your parents, which is something you should not do, just because it's an IT concern. So make sure that you keep your account secure, please. But they can log in with you and see it that way, or if you've given them proxy access, which is through the registrar's website like we talked about, that will give you directions on how to set that up. We can talk to them about it. So if they call in and they're like, hey, Cody, what did you get in Pell Grant this year? And they're my parent, which would be weird that they're calling me at financial aid for me to tell them that. But I would tell them, you know, I was offered this amount because you're my proxy. I can tell you these things. And the way that we secure that, and this is kind of fun, if you want a little tidbit for you students, you get to give your parents a passphrase on your proxy that they would call in. So if Joe's mom calls in and she's like, hey, can you look up Joe's account and tell me X, Y, or Z? I would say, sure. What's Joe's student ID number? She'd give me the student ID number. I'd look her up in our proxy form and I would say, okay, what's the passphrase? Well, you get to determine what the passphrase is. So if you want to make your parents say Joe's the best, or Joe's their favorite kid, or something that, you know, is just going to embarrass them, or whatever the case is, like, I mean, that's what you get to do. And that's a little bit of fun, I suppose, you can have on that end, but they will have to know that passphrase in order for us to talk about anything financial aid related to them.
So I think we had a question, if you wouldn't mind clarifying. Is accepting the terms and conditions for financial aid separate from accepting the financial aid itself?
Yes. So tidbit, just going forward, because a lot of people, I've had this question actually a lot on the phone recently. Anything that is considered free money, which is money you do not have to pay back to whatever institution or the government, so your grants, your scholarships, those kinds of things that are earned or free, we as the institution automatically accept them for you. What that means is that we just, unless you just absolutely really want to decline your free money, which if you do, we can chat about why you're doing that, but your free money is automatically accepted. So accepting your terms and conditions just means I've read what the terms and conditions are on all this free money that has been accepted for me, and then acknowledging that you accept that those terms and conditions are laid out. That is different from the loans or anything else that you would have to pay back. And that's why I tried to separate them. So when you do terms and conditions, you're acknowledging everything that's on the screen. The next screen over will be your loans, which you can then decline. Declining that screen means that you've declined the direct loans that have been offered to you, that you did not decline any Pell Grant or any PISCA scholarships or anything else that might be on your account. It does not decline free money by doing that.
Speaking of free money, we had a couple of folks ask about the merit scholarships at UNC Asheville and if they apply only to the first year or all 4 years. And the answer to that is as long as you maintain a 3.0 GPA, the PISCA scholarship, which is the name of the merit scholarship administered by admissions, that should stay with you all 4 years at UNC Asheville. Another student wanted to know if you could apply for outside scholarships past your freshman year. The answer to that is absolutely yes. And definitely check out that financial aid website for a list of scholarship resources, outside scholarship resources. I have a question here about health insurance. Do you happen to know the typical amount charged for the UNC system health insurance?
I don't know what next year's rate will be. This year was $1,310, I think. Jen, is that right? Roughly. Yeah, it's about $1,310, $1,310 for a semester. So you can get that waived if your parents do have insurance on you. You can go through, I always, like I said, I Google everything. So I would Google UNCA student health insurance, and then it will give you the name to the website that you'll go to that you can actually show them that you have insurance through your parents, and you can get that waived if that is an option for you. If you don't have insurance through your parents, then that is a charge that will be on your account, just to make sure, because it is a mandate that you have to have insurance on yourself or be covered by insurance. So that will be on there unless you prove that you have insurance elsewhere.
Do you happen to know if the income requirement for receiving a Pell Grant changes from year to year, or is that pretty constant?
That changes. Well, there's a lot of things that kind of go into that. It's going to be income. That fun word. It depends. It depends on income. It depends on the size of the family, how many of those family members are going to college. It depends on if there's child support coming in. If there are, I'm trying to think what the other words are that I'm blanking on. If you have assets and you have any kind of like things in stock, like there are a lot of things that kind of depend and can change that. Traditionally, and this is just speaking traditionally, if you are Pell eligible for 1 year and your income does not change drastically from this year to the next year, you would remain Pell eligible. It does not change or fluctuate that much. So if you had income in the household that was $24,000 in 2018 and you went up to $25,000 in 2019, it'll change your Pell Grant a little bit, but it's not going to change it in an astronomical amount that should make it's not going to affect you in a negative amount, like super. Yeah, it's weird and hard to talk about because there's so many aspects that go into it, but traditionally if the income in the house and most things do not change between 1 year to another, you would remain eligible for Pell Grant.
Beautiful. So I think this is a perfect question to end our first UNCA Q&A on. We had a couple folks ask who they should reach out to if they'd like to adjust their financial aid award or request additional funding.
Grayson. No, you can reach out just to the main financial aid email address is preferable. Most of the time I'm the one that reviews a lot of these cases. As you can imagine, with everything that's going on right now, there are a lot of people that are asking to be reviewed, and that's perfectly acceptable and understandable. But if you email me directly and I'm swamped or I'm out the office or I'm ill or something, there's not a guarantee that anybody else could look at it. So if you email it directly to just the main financial aid email address, which again is just finaid@unca.edu. If I'm not in the office that day and you email it in, well, then my friend Jen can see it and we can kind of help and work on it from there. So you just want to make sure that it's going to the main financial aid email address.
Well, thank you so much to Jennifer, Cody, and Nate for organizing the first UNCA Q&A. I hope you learned something about your financial aid award and different financial aid options at UNC Asheville. All of our contact information can be found on the admissions website, and I highly encourage you to determine who your admission counselor is. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. As you can see, we're all still working from home, and we'd love to connect with you and assist you in any way possible during this kind of wild time. You can reach us there, admissions@unca.edu or finaid@unca.edu. I hope you all have an excellent night. Thank you so much for tuning in, and take care.
Thank you all.
Thanks.